in that kind of old 70s style, it's a revenge movie that spends its opening setting up a bunch of really bad things in order that you may feel morally justified when some really bad things happen to the people that did the really bad things at the beginning. So the dynamic is, so it opens with what appears to be sort of real pictures of atrocities, whether they are in a cannibal Holocaust kind of style. And then we have, he doesn't want to do he wants to just do some welding. He's doing a lot of welding at the beginning of this. But then these people come along and say, we want to do this. He said, you shouldn't go in there, it's really bad. But they want to. And then he says, oh, okay, because he kind of quite likes to go. And then he goes, and then really bad stuff happens. And they get killed. And then he has to go in and do some really bad stuff to get the people back. And the body count apparently is 236. And the film is 91 minutes long. And look, I like, films which have got things blowing up and stuff and action and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that this was not only a terribly bad piece of filmmaking, but a morally repugnant work. It's interesting that the BBFC in their, it's an 18 certificate, and you have to be quite tough to get an 18 certificate now, said, they say very specifically, they tell you all the things that happen in it, why it's an 18 certificate, like, the sight of some Rambo tearing open a man's throat with his bare hands and and all that sort of stuff, blah, 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 blah. And then it says, bloodier scenes at the climax of the film also rely on the audience's desire to see retribution for deeds carried out earlier in the work, and this lends the film a sense of revenge that is most appropriately placed in the adult category. That is as close as the BBFC come nowadays to saying that the film is morally bankrupt, to saying that actually in those last scenes the whole thing has been constructed to make you enjoy the spectacle of violence. Now look, I'm not going to get moralistic about the spectacle of cinematic violence because, hey, it's always been there, it's always going to be. What I really, really don't like is the kind of duplicitous fudging of the issue, the sanctimony, the sense of introducing themes of religion, introducing wider world, just all in the pursuit of carnage. Now, the film owes a visual debt, the worst kind of visual debt, to Saving Private Ryan, to that hideous, shaky camera, stuff really happening to people, in war scenes. But the thing was, when Spielberg did that with Saving Private Ryan, what he meant was, look, D-Day, not an action movie, really horrible, really genuine, terrifying thing. And in however many years it is, that whole thing has now turned into Rambo. It's just now another signifier of how action movie violence looks. And it's funny because at the time, I remember somebody saying to me, the problem is, no matter how well somebody uses this technique, 5 minutes down the line, somebody will reproduce it without any of the moral backbone, and you'll wonder whether it was a good or a bad thing that we discovered this new level of realism. I mean, it's a film whose moral bankruptcy runs through it. So it is like watching somebody down on their knees saying, give me a pile of money and I will do absolutely anything. I have no moral fibre whatsoever. I have no narrative fibre whatsoever. I have no political understanding of the world whatsoever. I mean, I've read a couple of the reviews and they've said, well, you know what? It's meat and potato stuff. It does the thing. It gets in. It does the carnage and then it gets out. I can't remember recently feeling quite so depressed about the way something, and all I could hear as this was going on was this conversation in what I thought was the worst day of my life in Cannes, with Sylvester Stallone saying, I just wouldn't go back and do that stuff, it's stupid. And you know what? It's so much worse than stupid.